So, welcome into episode 2 of the Fourth and Whinges podcast with your hosts Mark and Rob. If you're listening for a second consecutive week, then a special thank you and shout out to you. We were just talking off air, Rob, that it's been quite surprising how many listeners we got in the first week. I think we're up to about 89 now. So,
wow.
Yeah, exactly. Now they maybe have only listened to 2 seconds, but
I'm
taking the number. So yeah, it's about 89. So thank you very much to anybody who has given us a listen. We appreciate that.
If anybody wants to sponsor us, we are open to financial coercion, anything like that. Give us a shout, get in touch.
What's been great actually is some of the kind of comments and feedback that we've had so far has been very positive. And also we've had quite a few sort of ideas, listener questions, things like that, which was kind of unexpected, really. So again, thanks for that. So today we're going to kind of kick off, I think, with some NFL news. We're going to touch on some draft stuff, some pro day results that happened last week. We're going to briefly talk about fantasy football again. We had a question from a listener about that, so we want to just touch on that. And then there's a new segment that we're kind of going to put in this week that wasn't in last week, of course, and that is a listeners' questions section, because as I say, we did get quite a few questions coming in from people. Admittedly, most were people that we knew, but either way,
don't ruin it. So we've never met him, to be fair.
Well, no, that's true. No, we've never met, have we? But we play in Fantasy Football League together. So, and then we've also going to introduce another new segment, which is going to finish off the podcast each week, and that is our whinge of the week, which one of us is going to bring something to the table which is unknown to the other person, and we're just going to have a quick kind of chat about that at the end, just to kind of finish off the pod. So that's kind of what we got planned so far. So with that, if we head into sort of NFL news, free agency talk, do you want to go first on your point, Rob?
Yeah, let's get into it. So obviously, I think the biggest news of the week was the expansion of the schedule to 17 games. So that came about as a result of the collective bargaining agreement that was signed in the off-season last season. It doesn't come as a massive surprise. I think they were always going to try and introduce it as soon as possible. From a player point of view, I guess I could see it both ways. They now get an increased share of the revenue, but then is there, what's the impact of injuries and they have to play an additional game? How does that kind of affect things? I think the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about really was, the lack of symmetry, I think, is going to wind me up. So, if Jeff Fisher ever comes back into the NFL, he's not going to be able to go 8-8. I mean, I guess he could go 8-8-1. That would be a very Jeff Fisher season. But that aside, I think the biggest impact for me is the impact on the individual records during the season. The last time this happened, I think the NFL went from 14 to 16 games in 1978, and there's so many asterisks against records already. So Eric Dickerson has the regular season rushing record of 2,105 yards. That was in 1984 with the Rams. So that was 16 games. But OJ Simpson, we're all right mentioning OJ, are we? Yeah, it's fine. For the Bills in 1973, in 14 games, was for 2,003 yards. So, which is the bigger achievement? That's the issue I kind of have with it. Last season, Derrick Henry went over 2,000 yards for the first time. Adrian Peterson's done it in recent years. Chris Johnson. I just don't like the asterisks is in the record books. I don't know what your thoughts are, Mark.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of muddies the water a bit, doesn't it? But I think that my counterpoint to that, I guess, would be, particularly in more recent years, the way that the NFL has shifted from a running game to a more of a passing game. You could argue that it's more of an achievement now because people just don't run the ball as much. So for me, Henry doing that last year, in his last couple of seasons in particular, he's been really good and going over 2,000 yards last year. As I say, in an era when people tend to throw the ball so much more, he's kind of the counter argument to that. But you're right, kind of just lining them up side by side, it's difficult, isn't it? And it's going to, further muddy the water, if you like, moving forward with an extra game. But I think personally, I'm never going to complain because it's more football. It gets rid of one of the. I think they're dropping the last pre-season game, aren't they?
I believe they go down to 3 pre-season games. Yeah.
Season 1 kind of extend, if you like, but those pre-season games aren't the best. So I suppose that's the other impact, really, is that on kind of your undrafted rookies and your fringe players are going to have one less game potentially. They will have one less game to shine. So it kind of does have a bit of a knock-on effect there as well. But all in all, I'm kind of I love the idea, love the concept, and it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me, like you said, if they were to extend it again.
I think that's only a matter of time
to line it up again.
The next CBA is due in 2031, so I think we can almost pencil in 2032 as an 18-game season straight off the bat. Yeah, for me,
because I think like you said about the kind of the fact that it's not the lack of symmetry to it. The way they're doing it, as I understand it, is that this year the AFC teams all get an extra home game.
Correct.
And next year it'll rotate around to the NFC. So
there's some great games in there, though. I think you being the Chiefs fan, I think you're now playing the Packers, aren't you? Yeah, in that additional 17th game. So there's some really interesting games. I think they've matched the divisions up, haven't they? And they've gone first place first. Yeah. So that we've got some really good additional games there, to be fair.
And I think another thing that it will do, it will add more. It will bring the worst and the best teams closer together again. It will add, which is what the NFL is really good at anyway. But because what you're doing, like you said, there is you're aligning where you finished with that extra game. So the better teams are playing the better teams from last year, and the worst teams are coming from the worst. So 2 teams with bad records last year will be playing each other. So one of them will get an extra win in theory, and vice versa. So it will bring more kind of parity, which is what the NFL does really well.
Absolutely.
But, I think it's good news. Good news, and I was pleased to hear that.
Of those 17 games, how many do you think, this is a seamless link into our next piece on the news, Jimmy Garoppolo will play?
Jimmy Garoppolo, I put my teeth in. I expect him to play some, and I expect him to play them probably with the 49ers to kick off the season, because that's what I think that's the most likely, because I think if they think they're going to shift him and for a first-round pick, that's kind of what they're asking for. That's what I've heard that they want for him, which I guess in any kind of deal you start with what you above what you want. So I think they'd be more than happy to take a second-round pick, which is what I think they paid for him. And what he was as coming out, wasn't he? I think he was a second-round pick as well. So, so I think that's more realistic. But they're saying they want a first. Maybe they will get that. Maybe they won't. But I do expect him to play some games potentially at the start of the season for the 49ers. But he certainly won't be playing 17 for them, I don't think.
Where do you think he ends up if he does get traded?
Well, I think the obvious answer is New England, isn't it? But I don't know about that. I think. So the thing is, when he first came out, I didn't know that much about him. I'll be honest with you, because he played for a small school. I think
Eastern Illinois.
School. Yeah, it was that same school as Romo. I think that Tony Romo, played there potentially. So I didn't really know that much about him, and I was surprised when the Patriots took him that high when I'd never heard of him really. But then in the games he played for New England, I thought he played well, and wasn't surprised to see him get that move. And then in the early days for San Francisco, he played really well. He looked really good.
He was incredible, wasn't he?
Yeah, I thought he was going to be a star really. And I think then what's happened is he's kind of leveled off and turned into what most quarterbacks are in the league, and that's kind of middle of the road quarterbacks, and that's kind of what he is. Not saying that the Bears wouldn't love him, or there are teams out there that probably would take him over players that they've got, but I don't think anyone will be clamoring for him.
I think for me it's the injuries as well. He's just not. He just can't get through a season. That's a big red flag for me. His talent he's probably not in the top tier of quarterbacks, but he's probably, he's above average, I would say. But part of playing in the NFL is playing all the games all season. Oh, that was a bit of a rookie error. Phone wasn't on silent. If you're not on the field, then you're not contributing. Now, they've had to trot out Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard for the past couple of seasons, and that's ultimately what's kind of sunk them. So I can't blame them for moving on. I applaud the move, and that's the move that winning teams make. You go out, and if you think you've got a chance to get your franchise quarterback and to improve things, you've got to go and do it. So I'm never going to slag anybody off for making that move at all.
No, definitely not. The next thing that we were going to talk about is just really more. It's not exactly massive,
huge news, biggest news of the week,
but just because of our links to the Chiefs and the Jags as being fans of those two teams, I thought it was interesting that Damian Wilson, the linebacker from ex-Chiefs and Cowboys linebacker, has been signed with the Jags, and just wanted to get your thoughts on him, what you know about him, and how you thinking he might fit into the Jags, and if he will even play, I guess.
Well, initially I thought it was Damien Williams when I read it, because I misread it, which I'd have been quite happy about as a complimentary piece at running back. But there we go. I think it fits in with what we've done through the whole off season and free agency. We've not been dining at the top table, if you will. We made a lot of signings early doors. A lot of them have been for depth. I think of the 13 players that we've added, 7 have been on the defensive side of the ball. It would have been 8 if Tyson Alualu had gone through his signing, but he ended up going back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I was a little bit gutted about. But hey, how I'll get over it. If that's the worst thing that happens to us this season, I think we'll be all right. So I think he's probably going to be a bit of a rotational piece for us. Add quite a lot of depth. At the minute, we've got Joe Schobert and Miles Jack there. He's not going to be replacing either of them two. He can come in and give us, a bit of experience. We're going to have quite a young team. Hopefully, if all the draft picks pan out, from what I know about, he's quite physical. He's plays inside quite a lot. I think he will probably fit our scheme quite well. That's kind of where we've struggled sort of in the past. From what I've read, he's quite good in the run game, which again is we've just got absolutely gashed by the run in previous seasons. I think going back to Derrick Henry last season, we were part of the reason why he got 2,000 yards, because he just ran all over us. It just gives a bit of competition. We've still got so our picks in the past couple of drafts. We've got Quincy Williams there and Shaq Quartermain. Didn't really give us much over the past couple of seasons, but hopefully they start coming through. And if he can sort of give us a bit of cover and sort of bring those along a little bit, then I'm good with it. In Trent we trust. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right in terms of kind of the type of player that he is. I think he was definitely our kind of best run stopping linebacker. But I think with the scheme that we play, I think we need somebody that's a bit more athletic and a bit better in kind of on passing downs. I think that's why we've probably not kept him. But he does like to throw himself about, and he's played okay for the Chiefs. So, I wouldn't knock him as such, but like you said, I don't think he's going to be starting for you, is he? It's a good depth signing.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm all good with that. Yeah, we needed to improve defensively, and hopefully with that, and it should give us a little bit more manoeuvrability in the draft to maybe surround Trevor Lawrence with some weapons and make a few improvements. We can get into sort of mock drafts and things on another show, but just hopefully gives us a bit of flexibility. We've got a lot of picks. If we decide we want to trade back up to, somebody starts falling, then I think that from my point of view, we've been set up quite nicely for that, really.
The other thing, I suppose as well from a Chiefs point of view, I think it points, and we'll get into the kind of mock drafts and what we think like the Jags and Chiefs and other teams should be doing in later pods. But for me, the Chiefs, we've been lacking at linebacker in terms of an elite linebacker for since Derek Johnson left, basically, and I think we having left Wilson go, it's clearly one of our top sort of 3 or 4 needs, and I'd like to see us go there in the draft. There's a couple of people who I really like that kind of fit where we're picking at the end of round 1 or into round 2. So I'd be looking for us to certainly draft a young rookie to pair with Willie Gay, who we drafted last year, who showed things in bits and pieces. But again, I don't know if he's going to turn into that elite linebacker that you'd want. But we'll see. It's only obviously going into his second year. So, and then the other thing that kind of popped out at me, again, there's a bit of a Chiefs link here, obviously. But I heard that the Texans were potentially interested in signing Alex Smith, which I thought was interesting, given the fact that they've already signed a couple of quarterbacks this offseason. Obviously, with everything that's going on with Deshaun Watson, we touched on it.
Are we calling Ryan Finley a quarterback?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Just clarify.
Yeah. Absolutely. He played well in college. I like Ryan Finley. But he's a quarterback or a clipboard holder or something. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting because, as I say, personally, I love Alex Smith. I loved Alex Smith when he was at the Chiefs. I kind of had a lot more respect and admiration for him when I'd watched the video program about him and his leg and how serious it was and all of that and what he's had to do just to come back and play football again. It was a fantastic story last year. And then you hear that he's getting cut from the Washington football team. So you're like, oh, what's he going to do? He's surely going to retire, but clearly he wants to move on and keep playing. And, you can do a lot worse than just having Alex Smith in your quarterback room. Because I'm sure Patrick Mahomes would be the first to tell you that. He helped him loads when he was drafted, and he's just generally a nice guy to have around. So it would be interesting to see if that happens. That's kind of my thoughts and what I wanted to say on that, really.
I mean, I'd absolutely echo that. I mean, what a great guy. I think he can still play. I think we saw that last season. He's still gives you that aspect of mobility. Clearly reduced a bit, due to his age, due to his injury. But ultimately, I suppose he guided the football team to the playoffs last season. And as you said, the big thing he gives you is just that veteran presence.
Yeah.
I imagine I was hoping that we'd sign him as a backup. To be quite frank, if we let Minshew go, I think he'd be a great mentor for Lawrence. He's been a number 1 overall pick. Been a number 1 pick before.
Yeah.
Coming from the Niners, getting traded, all the adversities had to deal with. Superb and great guy. And I'm so pleased for him last season, coming back, playing all the games he played, and getting comeback player of the year. I don't think that's ever been more well deserved.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Right then. So the next thing on the kind of subject list is the NFL draft. We'll move on to that. Not a lot happening this week, really. There were a few pro days. No fantastic trades like we got the week before to talk about, sadly. But there were a few kind of high-profile players that had their pro days sort of in the last 7 days or so. And I wanted to just touch on a couple of players really that kind of stood out to me both positively and negatively. Again, get your thoughts on them, on those players, and whether you saw any of the pro day coverage or anything like that. So I'll kind of kick it off with some standout performances, really. Jamar Chase, LSU wide receiver, my number 1 wide receiver in this class. Many people's is not far off being the consensus number 1 wide receiver, I think. And my only concern with any of the prospects that have kind of sat out the year is what kind of shape can they be in if they've not played football for 18 months or whatever it will be come the start of the season. We know his tape speaks for itself. He's clearly a great prospect, but he kind of proved that he's in great shape and that he's clearly been looking after himself, and he displayed all of that kind of explosiveness and athleticism that you would expect him to kind of have. I think he came in at just under 6'1", 6 foot and 3/8, 201 pounds. His 40-yard dash 4.38, so plenty quick enough for a wide receiver at that size. And a vertical jump 41 inches. He's 3-cone, 7 seconds flat. He displayed kind of everything that you were hoping that he would display, and looked really good doing it.
I think, I'd agree with that. For me, he's definitely the number one wide receiver in this draft. I agree. I think pro days have taken a lot more meaning this year. I'm usually somewhat dubious of pro days, with the combine, etc. I'd much rather look at the tape, and I'd much rather go back and look at the production. But like you said, we haven't been able to see that. Sitting out a year, last time we saw him, he was playing with Joe Burrow. What are the impacts of that? But yeah, he did absolutely everything he could to solidify his position, and certainly didn't think anything that would dissuade me from that.
No, definitely not. So I'm going to go from good to bad. It's another wide receiver, somebody that I've seen on some draft boards as high as like the 5th wide receiver in this class, which is just ludicrous to me. And that's the Louisville wide receiver Tutu Atwell. He was kind of billed as this kind of almost this Tyreek Hill type player by some people, in that he's kind of undersized, a little bit undersized, but he's really fast and explosive, and blah blah blah. And then he comes in and measures in at 5'7", 155 pounds, and he goes and runs a 4.42. Now again, in isolation, 4.4 is not a bad time. Not it's not that much kind of slower than Jamar Chase, but he's 5'7", 155 pounds, and he's supposed to. He's one kind of overarching trait is supposed to be his explosiveness, his quickness, and you just didn't see that at all in any of his numbers. His vertical jumps 33 inches, broad jump 975. There's just nothing there that kind of leads you to think he's going to be an elite athlete, and I just don't see it. I think he's a 3rd or 4th round pick at best for me. I think I've got something like 8 or 9, possibly even more wide receivers ahead of him on my board. Wasn't impressed at all.
No, I think it's very deep at wide receiver, this group as well this year. There's certainly many more people that I would have on my board, above him. I think he probably needed quite a good day. It didn't happen. I think going into it, people were expecting him to run about 4.2. And had he done that, had he shown that, that completely changes it. Like you say, if he comes in, it can be Tyreek Hill-esque, then you're laughing really. It did strike me as I quite liked the NFL player comparison that PFF have down for Tutu Atwell in their draft guide is Tavon Austin.
Well, if anyone's chasing Tavon Austin, then go ahead and pick Tutu Atwell. I think you're on either way there, aren't you?
It could be a bit of predictor of future production, that I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Short of Jeff Fisher getting back in the league. Can't say that's the second Jeff Fisher mentioned today. I need to stop.
Effing and Jeffing. I think you were keen to touch on the 2 Miami edge players, weren't you? As well, in terms of how they went in their pro days, because you've got Jalen Phillips and Gregory Rousseau. They're the 2 players we're talking about here, the edge defenders for Miami. You've got Gregory Rousseau, who is kind of the bigger, leaner, longer prospect, who's again sat out this year, versus Jalen Phillips, who is slightly smaller, kind of bit stockier looking. He played this year and played very, very well. And in my mock draft today, he's been the first edge defender off my board. In the mocks that I've done, I do rate him. I think he looks like a very good player. And I think you look at the numbers from their pro day, and you see Jalen Phillips looking explosive, looking every bit of an edge player that you want to see, and Rousseau just not looking like that at all. Outside of his kind of his arm length, his wingspan, and just his height, he kind of just underwhelms at everything else. 40-yard dash 4.69, 3 cone 7.5. I mean, you're looking at under 7 is kind of the benchmark, or around 7 seconds is the benchmark, and he's 7.5 seconds. Just not good. Vertical jump 30 inches. 30 inches. I mean, it's just, when you compare that to Jalen Phillips at 36, it's a big difference. And I liked his tape. He was probably my number 3 edge before the pro day. And I suppose one thing that people say is, you shouldn't be drastically affecting your rankings based on just a pro day, which is a fair comment. Footballers are footballers, and the play should count for more. But I think when you're talking about that transition to the NFL, it's proven that explosiveness and certain stats, mean more. And an edge, you need to be explosive, or you need to be really technically gifted with your kind of pass rush moves, like the Bosas and things like that. And you just don't necessarily see that with him. So I worry about him a little bit. I think he's going to drop down a few boards as a result of the pro day, and the opposite to Jalen Phillips. I think you're going to see him kind of move up towards the top of people's edge rankings, and it wouldn't surprise me if he was the top 1 or 2 edge players to come off the board.
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate for Russo that he plays with Jalen Phillips, and they happened to have, they're both at Miami. They were both there. You could see them side by side, and it was, really obvious as to his shortcomings. Phillips ran a 4.56 40, weighing in at 260 pounds. I mean, wow. His vertical jump's 36 inches. If you want to get up, you're trying to, bat any balls at line of scrimmage, even anything like that, that's going to be key as well. I think he did have a bit of an injury history at UCLA before he transferred to Miami. I think if it wasn't for that, I think he might be higher at the boards, but certainly he's absolutely fired up the board with that pro day. I think, looking back at Russo, I don't know, if you gave him a full pre-season, you got him back up to speed. I don't know what he's been doing in terms of working out when he's been sitting out, because in 2019 he finished 2nd in the nation in sacks to Chase Young, so he got 15.5. Chase Young got 16.5. He was actually a high school wide receiver, which I thought was interesting. So you would expect his 40 time to be better than that. But he still does have that size and length, like you mentioned, Mark. And if you can give him that training, give him that coaching, get him back to full fitness, then you're right. I think he might drop, but I could still see him being a very productive player in the NFL. But for me, Phillips goes above him as of right now, definitely.
Yeah. I think he's a really good fit for Minnesota. I've put him in Minnesota in a couple of my mock drafts, and I still think he's a good fit there. And I think that they have again, I'm rubbish with names. Minnesota's head coach. Oh gosh,
it's just completely gone out of my head now.
Never mind. Anyway, whoever his name is,
Mike Zimmer.
Mike Zimmer, that's him. So he's got a kind of a history, a track record of kind of bringing on kind of good young edge talent. So I think it would be a really good landing spot for him. You're right. He was there or thereabouts with Chase Young in terms of production anyway. That year, he's kind of last year before he sat out. He's going to be. I still think he's going to go in the first round. I just think he's dropped down a little bit on the boards, and I was surprised at kind of how low some of his numbers were. I suppose the last one I wanted to touch on, just again from a Chiefs point of view, is I think we're going to be looking at a tackle. I think at the end of the first round, or at least I hope we do. And it's quite a good draft for tackles this year, thankfully. And I think somebody that had his pro day recently was Samuel Cosme from Texas, and he looked for a tackle for 6'4", 314 pounds. He ran a 4.8 40. He bench pressed 36 reps, vertical jump of 30 inches. So he's jumped he's got the same vertical jump as Gregory Rousseau, and he's 50 pounds heavier. He looks very athletic, and I think Andy Reid and the Chiefs, the way that we play, I think he will really suit our game. When we drafted Eric Fisher, we did so ahead of Luke Jokel in that draft, ahead of the Jags at number 2. And I think the consensus was that Jokel was the better prospect, but that maybe Fisher was the more athletic. And I think that's what we'll be looking for again, is an athletic tackle. And I think Cosme fits that bill. So I thought he looked very good.
I think he should be there for you as well. I mean, there's other tackles I think probably going to go higher, probably going to go off the board that you're probably not going to have a shot at. Just since you keep mentioning the Chiefs, just to mention the Jags, I think I wouldn't mind us taking Tevin Jenkins with our second pick in the first round. So I think I would have him over Cosme at the moment. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, started at Texas for 3 years. He's big prospect coming out of high school. Yeah, he's been great at college. I think he's played at both positions, so you could always start him at right tackle, move him across. I think he'd give you a bit of flexibility. Very athletic. Yeah, let's see, maybe a bit raw, but if anybody, let's coach him up. I think the Chiefs have got some of the best coaching staff in the NFL, so definitely maybe a bit boom or bust. But I would trust the Chiefs to get the most out of him than I would other coaching staffs, like say the Jags.
Yeah, no, he really intrigues me. So I would certainly like someone like him to be coming to us. There were a couple more I was thinking of touching on, but we're already kind of into the 30 minutes mark, so I'm going to skip over them.
Wait for the spin-off podcast of Mark's offensive tackle rankings, which will be out later this week, clocking in at 4 hours 50 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But no, so we'll move on for now. So the next topic we were going to talk about is just fantasy football. And again, as I said in the intro, I don't want to spend too much time here, but I just wanted to answer a question that we got after the first episode, because we mentioned one of the leagues that we're going to be in this year, and we mentioned that it was a Dynasty league and an IDP league. And one of the listeners that we had kind of wanted us to just expand on that, because again, with this kind of probably mainly hitting UK viewers, maybe there's not as much exposure to some of those terminologies to some of the people listening. So the listener we had sort of wanted us to just expand on that a little bit. So I thought we could do that just quite briefly, just kind of touch on what we mean by that. So the concept of a dynasty league is different. Most fantasy football leagues that you see, and the ones that I played in the early days were what you call redraft leagues. So each year you redraft from the pool of the full pool of players, and therefore you get a totally different team every year, in theory. And that's kind of probably think the most common fantasy football league that's out there. But then you have keeper leagues, which is the kind of the step up from that, if you like, in terms of complexity, where you've got a set number of players that you will keep from your roster at the end of one season going into the next. And so you might keep 10 players of a 20-man roster, and then you will just draft for the remaining 10 positions. And then a dynasty league is kind of going that extra bit, and you basically keep everybody. And the only people that you draft in your second and subsequent years is the rookies. So you draft out of the rookie pool. And so what that does is it does bring a different level of kind of competition, really, because it's more forward thinking. You're thinking more longer term, and you're trying to build a successful team for the years to come, not just kind of standalone. You'd be, it's more long-term thinking. It's more realistic, if you like, and that's what I really like about it, and that's why I wanted to do the league that we have in such a way to kind of focus on it long-term. And it's really good that we've got a great bunch of kind of people in that league who hopefully will be for a while to kind of build that. And so that's kind of the difference, really. And then from a dynasty league perspective, and then IDPs, do you want to touch on sort of the IDP side of it?
Yeah, can do. So on the dynasty side of things, for me, I think going into the draft, I'm aware this isn't IDP, but I'm just going to talk about something else first. Going into the draft, I had quite a clear idea of who I wanted in my mind. I wasn't really going to draft any wide receivers that were sort of older than 27. I didn't really want any running backs that had been in the league for sort of maybe 5 seasons tops, just coming off the rookie deal, just given where things were going. So in that vein, I think my second round pick, I took Justin Jefferson over DK Metcalf, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that Justin Jefferson was 21, DK was 23. I thought it was a bit of a toss-up between those two, but I went for the younger player, and I'm now hoping that I'm set at that position for a good number of years going forward until he inevitably does his cruciate this season and retires from the league. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. And Justin Jefferson, I love you and I'm rooting for you. So yeah, on the IDP front, I know this through quite a lot of people. So IDP is just individual defensive players. So what have we got, Mark? We've got 2 defensive backs, we've got 2 linebackers, and we've got 2 defensive linemen. So I think for me, again, in that ilk, you want to be targeting players that are flexible, that can play a number of positions. So certainly within the app that we use, just to give you some examples. So I've got Josh Allen, he's listed at defensive line and at linebacker. I know one of the guys has got Jeremy Chin, who's defensive back / linebacker. You want to be giving yourself some of that flexibility. And I think the key thing for in terms of defensive players, it's almost the opposite of offensive. You kind of don't want to be going for the big name players sometimes. There are exceptions to that. So if edge rusher wise, you want to be targeting your TJ Watts, your Bosa's, your Myles Garrett, absolutely. But in terms of defensive backs, certainly, I wouldn't be looking at Jalen Ramsey just purely for the point of view that he's not targeted that often. So he's an amazing player, but in fantasy terms, that doesn't show up because he doesn't get the opportunity for interceptions. He doesn't get the opportunities for passes defensed or tackles. So for me, I was kind of looking a bit further down the board, letting some of the others go for these bigger names, and then trying to pick up some younger guys a bit further down who have those opportunities. Probably in a similar way for the linebackers, you want to be targeting your Luke Kuechly like linebackers that are going to be getting those interceptions, that are going to be picking up those fumbles, that are going to be running it back. There's a certain kind of player you want to be targeting. I think it is a lot more difficult to pick up some of those players. But I'm a big fan of it. It takes out that element of luck. If you just drafting defense special teams, you tend just to cycle through those, get them off the waiver wire. I like the fact, again, it's a bit of a longer term plan, gives us somebody else to target in the draft. And again, I think what we're trying to figure out at the moment is where their values lie.
Yeah.
So that's quite difficult at the moment. Do I value a Myles Garrett over a DJ Chark? And if you look at their scoring for last season, I think Garrett either outscored him or it was very close. So it's just kind of figuring that through. And as we get at it for longer, I think we'll get there and we'll figure out. But that's probably the biggest struggle for me at the moment, trying to figure out where those values lie.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you've nailed it on everything you've said then, especially with it's funny when you see people like Jalen Ramsey going really high in the draft. No offense to whoever did that in our league. I can't think who it was off the top of my head.
I think it might have been Sean. Sorry, Sean. He won't listen. It'll be fine. It's funny because clearly he's the best DB in the league, but it's not going to really help you in fantasy. And like you said, the value, just balancing the value of a second or third tier wide receiver versus a starting linebacker. Are they valued the same? Where are you going to pick them, etc. And then sort of heading into this rookie draft, where do the defensive players in this rookie draft fit into it? It's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Absolutely.
So, right. So that kind of touches on the fantasy football stuff I wanted to talk about this week. So we then move on to the listener question. So the first question that we got this week, and for anybody who's watching on YouTube, I've just popped that up on the screen there. So Adam in Yorkshire has asked us this question. Derek Carr, why haven't the Raiders moved on after only one winning season with him at quarterback? We got a few questions come to us, and this was the one that jumped out to me. As a Chiefs fan, I thought, oh, this is going to be great to get into pummeling Derek Carr and giving my opinion on him. But no, in all seriousness, I thought it was a really good question, and I think it's typical of the way that the league's going now in terms of what you do with a quarterback like Derek Carr, and how long do you persist. So I thought it would be a great subject to kind of touch on. What I've done, again, for those watching on YouTube, I can just bring in into the feed here.
Check this out. Just production values and everything. Incredible.
Just some bits and pieces that I pulled together just to kind of show where what Derek Carr's been doing. So he was drafted in the second round of the draft back in 2014, and for this first sort of 3 years on his rookie contract, you can see he's kind of got steadily better in terms of completion percentage and touchdown to interception ratios, that kind of thing. And that, at the end of the 2016 season, I believe, is when he signed his second contract. You can see
he was the highest paid quarterback in the league at that point, I believe. I think he overtook Andrew Luck, and he was very quickly usurped by Matt Stafford, but just goes to show the kind of contract they gave him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see he jumps from less than 1% of the total cap for the team to 9%, and he's been as high as nearly 14% in recent years. What's really interesting as well is, obviously, quarterbacks are notoriously linked to their record, maybe a little bit harshly, but that's what we do. His kind of record as a starting quarterback, he's outside of his third season, is not great. And also in that time, the Raiders have never won the AFC West either, which, again, you are judged on wins and how you do in your own division. So as a Raiders fan, I can imagine that people are starting to get a little bit kind of annoyed with Derek Carr as a player now, because he's not kind of gone on to that next level, if you like. I think, as I said, I touched on in episode 1 of the podcast, I'm a big PFF fan, and if we just look at his grades and where he ranks in relation to the rest of the quarterbacks in the league, these are his ranks over the next, over his years in the league. He was 35th, 10th, 5th in that third year, which is his kind of standout year.
2016,
yeah. Then he's gone 22nd, 21st, 11th, and 10th. So something of a revival over the last couple of years, but still, nothing really to kind of shout home about. And I think for me, he's kind of he's almost showing similar pattern of play to Alex Smith at the Chiefs, in that you kind of know what you're going to get from him, and to some degree he's reliable, and he's going to pick up 7-8 wins potentially every year, and he's not going to do too much to kind of hurt you as such, but he's certainly never going to win you a Super Bowl, in my opinion. And I think as a Raiders fan, you've kind of got to be looking at how you go on and push on and win a Super Bowl. And I personally just don't see that happening with Derek Carr at quarterback.
I totally agree. I mean, he wears number 4 as a homage to his favourite player, Brett Favre, and I think that's very much where the similarities end there for me. It's a tough one because he's been a good draft pick, you could say. He leads the Raiders. He's got a load of their records at the moment. It's a tricky one. He's gone to the Pro Bowl a couple of times, but he's never going to elevate you above that level. To steal a segment from sort of one of my favourite podcasts, a bit of the inspiration behind doing this was the Around the NFL podcast, and they talk about the Dalton scale. So a few years ago, it was that Andy Dalton was the prime meridian of quarterbacks. If your quarterback was better than Andy Dalton, you had your franchise quarterback, you were set. If you were worse than Andy Dalton, then you needed to get better, you needed to improve. And I think for me, that's right about where Derek Carr is now. He's very competent. Like Mark said, he won't ever really turn the ball over or cause you to lose any games, but he's just not going to elevate you to that next level of play. And I think we went through, we averaged his ratings out, I think, Mark, and he was 16th in his time in the league, which is bang in the middle, obviously, of 32. So for me, I think if you're the Raiders, you've kind of got to look to move on. But as you said, he's going to get you 7 or 8 wins most seasons. So you're always in those sort of that odd part of the draft where unless you start trading, unless you start making a move, you're never really going to get up and have a chance with one of the premium quarterbacks in the draft. So it's a strange one for me.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, I guess, to just add into that is so I've also put in there the PFF's offensive line rankings during the Raiders' time with Derek Carr, and to be fair to him, his best year, 2016, he was working behind the 4th best offensive line. So again, it strikes me that again, you put the better players around him, he's going to perform better. That's kind of stands to reason. Whereas the last 3 years, they've ranked 28th, 15th, and 24th. And although he's had a good couple of years, a decent, I won't say good, but kind of
statistically good,
better than average the last couple of years. He's been working behind not a great offensive line. So you could argue that maybe if they improved that, maybe you'd get some better production out of Carr. But I'm still not buying that he's going to win you a Super Bowl. And I think, therefore, they're in this kind of predicament where his contract runs out at the end of 2022, I believe. And so this year, if they were to cut him this year, they'd save around $19.5 million with $2.5 million in dead money. Dead money being money that they've already spent to him that they would have to just give up even if he wasn't playing for them. Whereas next year there's no dead money and they can release him and save just under $20 million. So for me, Derek Carr, you're almost on a 1-year deal here where I think if you don't do something different, if you're a number, I don't know, 8 through 16 quarterback this year, it's not gonna cut it, and I would be massively surprised if they offered him a new contract at the end of this, this current contract. I think they'll be looking to move on shortly.
I agree. I'm very surprised they never gave Mariota a go, to be honest. I don't think he's the answer at all, but just to give them that little bit of a spark, similar to the way that when the Titans moved on from Mariota, Tannehill's come in and he's had a bit of a renaissance. Yeah, give that a go. Just try something, do something different. Mariota gives you that athleticism, that that running ability. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he's an incredible quarterback, but let's see what he's got. Let's see what he can do. Other than that, they're going to struggle unless they sort of trade away some of their. Well, they've basically traded away all their offensive line and some of their key players this season. I don't know what the plan is at the Raiders. Letting Rodney Hudson go, letting Gabe Jackson. What is the plan? How have they got better? What have they achieved in this offseason? I don't see it. So I mean, letting Nelson Aguilar go. He had a good season last season. You brought in Henry Ruggs in the draft. Obviously, I think Henry Ruggs needs to take a leap. But does Henry Ruggs play to Derek Carr's strengths? Probably not. You've got Brian Edwards, who I like a lot, that they took in, I think, the 5th round last year. I'm expecting him to come on a bit. You've got Hunter Renfrow out of the slot. There's a makings of things. I think the running back room's very good. They've got Josh Jacobs. They've just signed Kenyon Drake, which is a great 1-2 punch there. Maybe second only to Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb at the Browns. So he's got the weapons. He's got Darren Waller. Need to start making the most of it. And like you say, Mark, if it doesn't happen this season, I don't think they've got any choice but to move on.
No, I agree. It's one thing I didn't point out there, but yeah, you're right. He's got the weapons, or he certainly had the weapons over the years, and he's certainly got some good weapons still in Jacobs and Ruggs in theory, and Waller certainly, and he should be performing better. I understand he's in a difficult division to win, but that still doesn't mean you can't beat the other teams that you play. It still doesn't mean you can't have 10 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins. Yeah, and don't necessarily expect them to beat the Chiefs, even though I think they did last year. Didn't they
did. That was when Ruggs had I think it was an 83-yard touchdown. And
so they've got the players. They can do it, but you just don't see it on a consistent basis with him. And I think that'll be the thing that does it for Derek Carr. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it happened at the end of this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes all the sense in the world.
Right, and then so fine. I hope that answers your question, Adam, and that you get something out of that. And
yeah, sorry, Adam.
Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about Derek Carr. Whether you agree with us, whether you think they should be re-signing him, whether you've already kind of had enough of him or whatever. Just let us know. And then finally, we wanted to kind of end future podcasts, as I said at the start, with our kind of whinge of the week, going in. Fitting in nicely with our name, and we're going to take it in turns to kind of bring something that the other person doesn't know about. We don't know what we're going to talk about, basically. And Rob, you're going to go first this week.
Yeah, so I'm going to whinge about your podcast hosting. No, I'm not. I'm
Harsh.
No, my whinge of the week this week came through, I think, earlier on in the week. The Bills have sold the naming rights to their stadium yet again. So we've gone from the Rich Stadium when it was initially built, which is a local food products company in the area, Ralph Wilson Stadium, after their old owner. Can't really argue with that. New Era Field, getting a bit dicey now, but New Era, Buffalo company, synonymous with the NFL, with the baseball caps, etc. That it kind of works, but what they've gone to now is it's a local healthcare provider in up in New York State. So their stadium is now going to be called the Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield Stadium. Which, I'll be honest, it's absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. I mean, it's not all about that. It's not all about the money, is it? Let's get some history there. Let's keep something there. Bills Stadium last season. Great name. Bills play there. It's a stadium. Like it. Everybody knows what it is. What the hell is the Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield Stadium? First of all, it sounds like I'm saying hello to you.
That's what I was going. I mean, I'd not heard of that at all. I'd heard that they were changing the name, but I hadn't heard what it was being changed to. So that was my honest reaction to that. And I agree. I think it's pretty ludicrous, to be fair, isn't it? I know it's the way in the States. They do get the sponsorships and call the stadiums that in a lot of cities, but yeah, that's what's it going to get abbreviated to? Does it abbreviate to something hilarious, which can kind of save it grace or anything?
I guess it's going to become the Highmark Stadium. But I mean, if I'm Neil Reynolds on Sky Sports, if I'm Scott Hansen, I'm not going to be saying, right, let's go out to the Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield Stadium. I'm going to be saying, let's go out and see the Bills. Let's go out to Buffalo. It's dreadful. I mean, Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. That's quite cool. I don't mind that. God, it's absolutely awful. I mean, Jags play at TIAA Bank Field, which, I mean, that's crap as well, isn't it? But at least it's shorter. I did pull out some other weird stadium naming rights deals that I've seen in England, just to sort of give you a bit of a flavour for it. There was some that I liked. One that I very much enjoyed was Livingston Football Club up in Scotland. Their stadium's been sponsored by, I think it's a local pizzeria up there. So it's called the Tony Macaroni Arena, which I thought was, I mean, awful, but kind of fantastic at the same time. Castleford Tigers Rugby League. Their stadium is known as the Menderhose Jungle.
Wow.
It used to be the Jungle, now it's the Menderhose Jungle. If you want any hoses mending, just buy a new one. Buy a new one. Don't get it mended. Just go and buy one. They don't cost anything. What a ridiculous sponsor. And then the best one by far that I found, this isn't a sponsorship, this isn't stadium naming rights at all. It's quite historical. So there's a smaller football club in the lower leagues, I think it's London, called Lewis FC. And they play at the Dripping Pan. Which I'm not overly sure of the origins, but I think it's due to the shape of the ground or the shape of the clubhouse. But it's been known as a dripping pan since its inception, which I think that's superb to end on a positive. But Bills, sort yourself out. Absolutely terrible. I, for one, will never be saying those words.
No, and I'll never remember them. That's the thing. So what advertising is it doing if I can't even remember it?
What was it? Can you remember what it was called now?
Highmark something or other. That's exactly all I remember. You need a proper stadium like Arrowhead. That's what people need.
Yeah, can you imagine if they started calling it the
No, I
Yeah,
would not.
the Dick Sporting Goods Stadium or something like that. Or the...
No. A very worthy whinge of the week, which we can end on. So that kind of about wraps up today's episode. So I think all that's kind of left to say again is thanks for tuning in. Special thanks to Adam for his listener's question. We hope we did a decent job of answering it. If anybody else wants to submit a question for future podcasts, the easiest way at the moment to do so is to kind of comment on our YouTube page. You can find us quite easily. Just go on YouTube and search for Fourth and Whinges podcast, and we'll come up. Or alternatively, if you do know us in person, you can of course drop us a note on WhatsApp or via social media or whatever. If in future weeks we kind of get quite a lot of interaction from people we don't know, then we'll probably look to set up either an email address or a Twitter account or something to kind of handle that. But for the moment, the best bet is kind of YouTube. And with that fourth down conversion, we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next time on the Fourth and Whinges podcast.
See you next time, guys.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.